Thanks for joining us today on The Perfect X. My name is Sherry, and this is my co host Leigh.
Hello, everyone.
And today we are talking about don't force it.
Mm,
Yeah, forcing. What is that saying? That don't put a peg in a round hole?
square
Or
peg
what
in a
is.
round hole.
Yeah. Clearly,
Yeah.
I've been doing it because I don't even know the saying. But actually, I'm notorious for this. So I'm really glad we're touching this topic because I think and I see this a lot with the younger, like as we grow older, we learn not to do this, but in younger generations, we all have done it many, many, many times over. And that's kind of forcing a situation that just shouldn't be.
hmm
And I think a lot of that comes in because we don't really know ourselves yet. And as we get older, we're like, okay, actually, I know for a fact this situation will work for me. But when we're younger, we're like, okay, let me see, let me
Yeah.
try. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's a fine line between like knowing when something's critical that's not going to fly, like say one person wants kids and one doesn't, and then something that can be worked on, like you have something you have to work through, right? So it's always trying to figure out if the issue is something that can be improved or something that's a deal breaker, I guess.
Exactly, exactly. But I also think about it in the emotional stance. So like it's not obvious red flags, like something you can discuss like children.
hmm
I think it's kind of those simple communication things that we work on, and them and the individual's natural personality and your natural personality, and trying to force a situation.
hmm
Um, that we think we're working on. Like we kind of confuse the difference,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the important is just kind of understanding whether you're working on a relationship or you're forcing something that isn't there.
It's not going to improve or change.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a lot harder, I think, to sometimes pinpoint when it's based on your characters and not obvious like likes and dislikes or lifestyles, or it's kind of like forcing the way someone makes you feel or how you want them to make you feel.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that happens, and I shouldn't say it's just younger generations, because I do think that I know a lot of adults that do too, is when we think someone or we idealize a relationship idea with that person. And so we keep pursuing something that's really not what the facts are of what you two are together.
Yeah, yeah. I think you try to like project what you want the relationship to be, perhaps.
Exactly, exactly. And project who you assume that person should be in that relationship, and they aren't that person. So it's just not working out.
Yeah.
I think I see this when I see it with people, and I'm guilty of it myself, so I'm not just pinpointing on people, but when you see someone really, I mean, where I would say the difference between working on a relationship, um, and that's kind of like working together to stay together in a healthy way, and then identifying something that you're pushing that's not healthy. And I think it's usually more obvious when you see someone losing their self-worth.
Yeah.
They're more uncomfortable with who they are when they're in that relationship.
Yeah, or they like big sort of like if you know them and they don't aren't really being themselves when they're in around their significant other when you've known them forever and you're like you're not like that, like you're not quiet or withdrawn, and then you're with someone and all of a sudden you're acting like not yourself.
Yeah, in a negative way. That's a good way of saying it, like quiet and withdrawn, because it's different when it's like they're not themselves as in they've grown as a person and they've bettered
It's
themselves.
improved,
But
yeah, yeah, but
yeah,
yeah, if
but
you find that you're kind of like having to sort of hold back or behave differently in a negative way. Yeah, I see that like lots of times with people that they try to maybe fit into that box or try to be a certain way, and then they aren't who they would naturally be.
yeah, like they're downplaying their natural positive traits.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Like I've seen it, you're right, like I've seen it in couples where like the guy or the girl is very, and I mean I can think of a couple specific things, but like the guy or the girl are, they like to be the center of attention.
hmm
And my friend downplays their successes, who they really are, because they don't want to take away from that person's life, but it's to a point where they diminish everything about their positive successes, like
yeah.
I know a friend of mine who, she was a lawyer, and her, like the guy she was kind of like hanging out with or whatever,
hmm
he was also a lawyer, but he like always wanted to like one up and act like he knew better and he was everything more. So
Mm,
even though like things that I knew she knew better or she whatever she would just never bring to the table, she
yeah.
really kind of downplayed her own, successes because she was so scared if she overshadowed him that he wouldn't want to be with her. Like he would think she was like like competition versus a partner.
Yeah, that's like a self-worth or like a self-confidence issue, and you shouldn't have to downplay yourself to sort of like accommodate anyone else.
Especially their ego, accommodate their need to be, bigger, better,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also, like, you shouldn't need to take away your self-worth in order to make somebody else, um, feel significant
yeah,
and,
yeah.
sorry, and feel like you're a partner,
Hmm.
like, instead of like, a competitor.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I guess, like, another way I've seen it is, like, someone's incapable of communicating their truth, which again is downplaying their self-worth, but, like, they kinda hide who they really are just to seem like, the guy or girl that they should be, and, that was, like, such a thing back in the day. Remember, like, a girl would pretend to be, like, so into a sport so a guy would like her.
Mm, yeah.
So, like, or like, probably with you, you've had girls like tire biters pretending they're so into cars just because they, they're like not really speaking their truth. They're just trying to be the girl that they think you would want to hang out with.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it's such a there's so much overlap in these different topics that it's like you trying to you're sort of withdrawn when you meet someone and you're trying to put your best foot forward. But yeah, then all of a sudden they think you're someone completely different because of, you maybe took that too far or you tried to reel in your personality or even like your success to try and like sort of close that gap. And then you're stuck in that reality with this person and they only know you like the way you are, right? They're like, how is this, how did you how were you before? And then you were sort of downplaying yourself to try and not be so intimidating or whatever it might have been. And then all of a sudden you're trying to like go back to your actual who you really are, and then they're taken by surprise because they only know the person you put forth on the first few dates.
It wasn't your truth, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which it's so because it's so tough to to say what the correct thing to do is because you're trying to be get to know each other and you're not going to be all come flying out of your shell on the first date. But yeah, like if you're 6 months in and you're pretty you're holding back something important, that would be tough to get that out and on the table the longer you wait.
And I think that usually like a good thing of like a good way to know if you're doing that as a person is to think, do you think that this person would like me if they knew who I really was? And if you're hiding who you really are so that they like you, because you think that they're incapable of loving you for who you really are, then that's like a big red flag.
Yeah.
So if you're hiding it because like maybe it's like a part of you like you're not ready to share or like it's a little bit private, that's one thing. But
Mhm.
if you're hiding it because you think this wouldn't fit their lifestyle or this wouldn't fit who they are as an individual, and so I'm better off just hiding and lying about it or just, you know, kind of restricting who I am as an individual so that they like me. Like maybe you're this really outgoing, loud person and you love to be social, but you exactly like you say, like the first 3 to 6 months, you're like always staying in and watching Netflix with them because you're scared if they knew like if it's not, the same person, like they don't like loud people, they don't like super talkative people, they rather have a very quiet demeanor individual.
Yeah.
If you have to hide that of who you are because you're scared they won't like you if they saw how loud or outgoing or too much you are, then
Mhm.
that's like a big red flag.
Yeah, I think it's hard because you're trying to it's really hard to be your absolute like authentic self when you first meet someone. That's why I think, and I've said it before, like where getting into a relationship the way I did with someone that you're friends with first, because you're not like even with you and I, like you and I never held back anything because we were never trying to like impress the other person or like be a certain way. We're just kind of like this is how
Fake
we
friends.
are. So
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you start dating someone that you met that way, I think that if possible, I think that's the best because you're not trying to sort of be anything other than authentic. You're just sort of saying how you are and being how you are, and then you don't need to sort of introduce parts of your personality as you go along.
But
But
that's like the dream, like
yeah, it
that's
can't.
like
It's not
this is
practical.
almost
Yeah,
as yeah, it's almost as hopeful as like Cinderella with her glass slipper these days,
yeah,
like
yeah. It's
let's be
not
real,
practical for sure.
everyone's social circles have after COVID gone from like to like whatever it was to nil. Like now
Mm,
everybody has like one or two close friends that they actually see.
yeah, yeah,
People really don't have, and like of those two people, they maybe know one more person. So no one's gonna set you up with anyone because they have no one to introduce. Like
yeah.
it's become like it's so fucking hard. You might as well wear a glass slipper and hope that Prince Charming finds it. Like, like
Yeah,
it's so impossible.
it's so much of it's about being as authentic as you can be, as early as you can be. There's always going to be that little bit of reservations when you meet. You're trying to put your best foot forward. But yeah, I think as long as you can get, your truth and your authentic self across as early as possible, and don't like let it be downplayed. Like if you meet, like I've said before, I dated a girl that was like outgoing and funny. And I was like, I was young and immature and I felt like, no, I'm the outgoing and funny one. Right. So like you
Mhm.
can't be outgoing and funny too. This isn't gonna work. Right. And we dated for like 2 years, but I was like, I think back to things she said. I'm like, that was actually really funny. But like at the time I was like, I'll fucking handle the jokes here. Just relax. Right. But it's to like now like it's to you got to embrace those traits about someone. You can't get involved with someone and think those traits are a problem, and if it wasn't for those traits they would be a more ideal boyfriend or girlfriend. It's
Well,
like
I'm glad you brought this up because I know you would never stifle someone's personality. Like that would never, never, never happen. But
mhm.
let's take that perspective and put it like someone else. And there are people who would see that and then try to stifle somebody's like
Well,
goofy
when I
friendliness
look
or
back
whatever.
at it, I feel like I inadvertently did do that. Like,
Oh, really? I could
yeah,
never
like,
see you doing that.
and it wasn't intentional, but like, I just, when I think about it, like, again, we were like early 20s, right? So when I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
about it now, knowing what I know now and being a bit more self aware, I'm like, I really feel like I didn't like embrace, all those things about her personality. And I'm like, and those are the things that I liked about her as a friend, and I thought, oh, she's funny and she's whatever. And then we started dating. I almost like was I don't want to say like threatened maybe, but like something where I'm like,
It
this is
makes
kind of
sense.
my stick, you know.
It totally makes sense. It was your what you were because it is true. I only know you as being like this super. If I want to describe Lee to anybody, he's the funny one. That's what
Yeah.
he is. So it
Yeah.
was your character and someone else coming into your character, and you didn't know how to share the space when you're younger, which is
Right.
normal.
Yeah. And I
It's
think
very
the girl I dated before her for a long time and girls I had dated after her were like very much more like the girlfriend that you knew that I was with. So very
not
reserved
funny.
and quiet and like what was that?
I said not funny. I mean, not to be
No,
mean, but she's
yeah.
not funny at all.
No,
She's a
yeah,
nice
which is
girl,
fine.
but
Yeah,
like
yeah, which is fine. But I
anything
guess
that
I was used to that template for a relationship. So when I was in a relationship with someone quite a bit different, I was almost like, man, I almost am like better off with almost an opposites attract situation than I am with someone that's like me. Right. I'm like, the last thing I need is another me. And I'm sure you'll back me up. Right. But
I think the
they,
last thing I want is another you
no, yeah,
too.
one is more than enough. Yeah. So like, I think that if you gotta like be, yeah, you really need to like embrace those things about someone else and not try and put them, stuff them down. Right. So,
But
that's,
that's a really interesting thing too, because if you think about it, one thing though, and we should like let listeners know you're not like an aggressive person, so I'm sure you never
no,
said anything.
no,
But
no. Yeah.
mentally for you, it was, and this is actually a really good point because mentally for you, I'm sure she didn't even know because obviously for 2 years she continued that way, so she didn't have an idea.
Yeah.
But there's it's mentally, can you share space, right?
Yeah.
And it is very true, we identify certain things with ourselves, like it's kind of sick, but I identify myself as like the junk food eater, like I always know the newest candy or whatever, whatever.
Hmm.
And it's something just as silly as that, like if someone else wants to challenge that space with me, like someone's like, oh, did you hear? I'll be like, yeah, I heard. And did
Yeah.
you know this? It's, and you
Yeah.
could take that into every aspect of a personality when you identify yourself with it, right?
Yeah.
So that was what you knew as being yourself. And so when we are dating someone, you should also like that is also different. You could work through that if you communicate and share like this is really hard, that's my space. And sometimes I feel like I you're taking away my identity. You could have communicated through that one, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it is
and
true,
I
and it's
it was
very
more my
normal.
problem when my
Of course.
insecurities and stuff. I'm like,
If
I should have just been like I said, now I look back on it and I think, oh, that was funny or this was funny or whatever. And at the time, yeah, it's just about you got to understand like where somebody's at and like don't try to never try to sort of step, put them down to raise yourself up or do anything like, you got to be comfortable with like like you're saying with the person's being true to themselves, like you have to be comfortable with them being their true self. Like and you can't,
exactly.
if you're
Can
not
you
cool with
share
that.
that space with them?
Yeah, and if you
And
can't, and you're someone that needs like a sort of a subdued, quiet partner, that's fine if you know that, but don't take someone that's not that and try and cram them into that bag, right?
And that's exactly what I was gonna say. That's actually the perfect example of the difference between working on something in a healthy way and forcing something that's not working. So, like, for instance, let's take that example. If you had like shared that and been like, look, it's really hard for me. This is what I identify with myself. I'm used to being that person. So if I come off a certain way, it's maybe and not to say you're a jealous person, but in a sense, and this is everybody has that with that thing they identify with. Like, even if you take the show Friends, they're each a specific thing,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's how you are with it in relationships. Like, everyone plays a certain role and everybody has a certain part of their identity they like that to be theirs.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me now as I'm older, like, I love to have like wild different types of fashions. I know like many times you think it's crazy. I don't want to have another girlfriend who comes and wears like my hot pink boots
Yeah.
because that's my hot pink boots. It's we
Yeah.
all have certain things. The difference is, are you communicating with your partner? Are you able to like find a way to share the space, or are you stifling them? And
Yeah.
that is like, for instance, when I can think about that lawyer couple, like, he wanted her to shut the fuck up and never ever show what she knew about a certain case or like a certain situation, or if like we were all in a group and we had like a question about the law or like something like that.
Hmm.
He wanted to be the only legal advisor and she never piped up, and if he did, he would shut her right down.
Yeah. You can't
And
fuck that. Yeah.
that's the fucking difference, and I think that's when you should know, is this person forcing me to be something I'm not in order for their comfort?
Yes.
And is it causing me to feel like I'm not myself? You know,
Yeah.
you're constantly sacrificing your self-worth in order for that person to feel better about themselves. And that's the difference, I think, between sharing the space and communicating, working on it,
Hmm.
and forcing something, or forcing
Yeah.
yourself not to be your true self in order for that situation to work. Because
And some of it might happen gradually. I think is part of it. Like when you meet people that are really not being themselves, and then you're like, it kind of happened inadvertently and like slowly. Like I don't think that everyone sets out to sort of stifle someone, but I think it's important to stop and recognize. And then if you have friends telling you that maybe you're like being stifled, and they're legit
exactly.
friends like we've talked about where they're not they don't have their own agenda, they just are observing. So if it's important for you to be able to be objective and be like, am I being exactly who I want to be, or am I being like a sort of a crappy version of myself to accommodate this person's fragile ego or whatever it might be.
And that's like another thing too. I think we always need to self-check, right? So
Yeah.
you should always, in like a relationship, ask yourself, are the changes I'm making positive growth? Are they serving me as an individual? Even if we're like, because relationships are hard, they are work. Marriage is work. It's so stupid and naive to think that, you're never going to have to work on it.
Right.
But when you are working on it, self-check. Are these changes, are the things we're working on, do I feel heard or do I feel misunderstood?
Hmm.
Am I are they helping me be more true to myself or grow in a way that will better myself, or, as an individual and as a couple, or am I sacrificing? And I think that is the time where you really need to decide,
Hmm.
is this too much? You know, like,
Yeah, is
is
the
this
gap
worth
too
it?
big, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a very big difference. Like, there's a clear difference when you're working on something and when you're sacrificing. And when you're working on something, you're going to be tired no matter what, right?
Hmm.
But you shouldn't feel, and like, I mean, there's a very big difference between feeling tired and feeling worn down regarding your self-worth, feeling abused, taken advantage of, depleted of who you are. That's different
Yeah.
than just feeling tired from having to like have these conversations over and over and work on things,
Hmm.
every time you have this conversation, you're not always going to feel great, but you don't feel like you're a piece of shit or you don't feel taken
Yeah.
advantage of or abused. There's just a very, very big difference in the way the communication and the changes are being made.
I feel like the big one of the biggest factors in this is like for men, like so many men are insecure, and I
Hmm.
feel like that is a huge factor in women playing down their success or their personality or whatever it is. Because for me, like I'm definitely not like I've never really been terribly insecure, but I'm much more secure now in who I am and whatnot. And I meet guys that are like they won't let their wife drive when they're in the car. You know what I mean? Or like they
I
really
hate driving, so I love a guy
and
like
that's
that.
fine, but my wife
But
gets
there's a
car sick.
difference.
Like, my wife gets car sick really easily because she's screwing
Yeah,
around
yeah.
on her phone the entire time, but she doesn't so she's like, "I don't feel good when you're driving," and I'm probably driving like an idiot, and she says but she's always monkeying with her phone, so I'm like, "Okay, well, it just works better for us because number 1, she gets car sick pretty easily, so she likes to drive, and number 2, I drive all day for work, so I'm quite happy to not drive, right?" But I've
You're right. There's a
more than one person has told me like that they almost like think it's weird that the girl drives.
there's a very big difference between you guys deciding as a couple, like, this
Yeah.
is, you know what I mean? And a
But
guy not allowing a girl to drive because he
it's
thinks it's
like a
uncomfortable.
security, like what do you call it? Like a masculine situation, whatever. Like I could give a shit less. It doesn't bother me. Like I don't care. Like if my wife wants to drive and we go four wheeling and she'll drive and people are like shocked. I'm like, it's not like we just invented fire. Like, like it just doesn't occur to me, but I see so many insecure men out there. Like, and I think that so many problems stem from that because you're trying to, if you push that, your significant other down to sort of like, because,
Feel masculine.
feel nasty or feel like whatever it is, and a lot of these people like take like your friend who's a lawyer, like they take a back seat to these people for some reason. Like, I don't know why, but it's just one of those things that you got to be aware of. You're like, is this guy insecure and like he won't, like he's being weird towards me about one thing or another? Like, it's not, you got to know if it's not you, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with you going, you know, to dress up and go out with your friends, or like you're driving, like, or whatever. Like, you got to stop and think, like, are any of these concerns legitimate, or is this person just like insecure and like projecting their issues onto me?
It's funny they say like the I don't know why thing. I think it's because, like now women are all like about, like we've been saying like raw women for a long time, but the reality is like only the newest generations are really empowered,
Mm,
because our generations are really like, we came back to the thought of, you never want to make more than the man. You never want to make him feel emasculated, because so you always allow the guy to be the head of the household, the head of like the driving, the head of the, everything. He
yeah,
was still the provider. He was still big. Even when it became two income households, the man was the bigger provider. The woman could always quit her job and the finances should be just as fine. That was the perception and the expectation. So
yeah, yeah,
I think that's how some women of like around our age group are still like, they're in the cusp of like not being that way, because as we're growing older we learn differently, but it is still part of our background. And
hmm,
then this new generation are all like, fuck that, if a guy can't handle where I'm at, he's not good enough to begin with, he
yeah,
doesn't deserve me. But we're
yeah,
not, we're like in between those.
yeah,
And so there's still a lot of confusion of it, and it is true, like it really is true, like there are men who don't allow their women to provide. They stay home. There are men who don't want the woman to drive.
yeah.
I'm looking for that guy. But no,
I
I'm
think,
kidding.
yeah, it's
But
important.
but
Yeah,
I'm just
like,
kidding. But there's a difference. There's a difference between like a guy, you don't do it. It's not like you're not letting your wife drive so that you can feel like a man. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
There's, or vice versa. I mean, you let her drive, but like there's a difference between someone choosing not to work because they just choose not to work, and someone being told not to work because it would be too, like, that would take away from the man's masculinity. I can't even say it now.
yeah. But like, to the whole theme of like, not putting someone down to, fit into the relationship, or someone having to like take your friend, the lawyer you're talking about, like you someone's like your success doesn't depend on someone else winning or losing. Like we can both win, right? So there
Mhm.
shouldn't be a
Yeah.
need to take one person down to move one person up. Like it's even like at work with my coworkers, there's three of us that do what I do in this area. And I'm always pumped for them to do well because it doesn't take away from me, right? We all just go
Mhm.
up together, right? So there's not like they get a deal that and now I don't get it, right? So in a relationship, there's no reason to someone to be pushed down to raise the other person up. Like you should both be lifting each other up and sort of like embrace those things that that person's personality traits and things. Like if those aren't like you're not into that from the get-go, like you shouldn't be with someone that like you feel that they either feel they need to change to accommodate you or you feel that you want to sort of muffle them and push them down so you can shine brighter, right? That just is not going to get anywhere.
No, I mean, that's all very, very, very true. I mean, all of those things will eventually deplete your self-worth. And
Yeah,
I
and then
think
you'll resent
exactly,
people and all that, right?
mhm. And I think it's exactly how you said it before. Like it's not usually something that's right away done. It's like with little things. And I think a good red flag for people that are listening is a kind of like with little things like, is he wanting, you to sit in the passenger side because he's the man, or is it because he wants to drive you and he knows you don't like to drive? Is
Right.
he
Yeah.
or she,
Yeah.
we shouldn't just keep saying he or she because there are women like that too.
Mm.
Um, and I think really another clear thing we can think about when it comes to are we pushing the situation or are we working on it? Are the kind of ways that they make us feel?
Mhm.
And again, like checking in with yourself. I think like really big things. And I'll tell you this, I had a relationship many, many, many years. All of these mistakes are all in our 20s, like you're talking about yours, mine too.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember like we were trying to what I thought was working through things, but there was just a lot of pointing and blaming and negative, and it was really trying to make that person something they weren't in order for the relationship to work on both ends, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget we had a bunch of people over, and even with all those people around us, and we seemed fine around everybody, but we weren't really connecting. He sent me a text and he said, "I've never been around so many people and felt so lonely." And
Hmm.
I, to this day, remember that because I also felt the way. In that relationship, I felt so alone all
Yeah.
the time. I never felt connected. We weren't connecting. We
Mhm.
weren't connected in any which shape or form because we didn't make sense unless we both stifled the other person. And when we
Mm.
were stifling them, we were feeling taken advantage. We were feeling neglected as who we are as a person. I was like feeling abused, like
Yeah.
not abused like physically, but like I
Emotionally,
was
right? Mm.
and really, I was abusing myself more than anything because I was agreeing to constantly not be who I was?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was also like in a way we're also abusive to ourselves when we do that. And
Mhm.
it started to feel like a solo project, like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
constantly, it wasn't a team effort. And I think that's a really good red flag to kind of touch base with yourself. Like, do I feel like I'm in a relationship or do I feel like I'm at the battlefield by myself
Mhm.
battling someone? And that's like a really good way of kind of touching base and thinking like, are we working on this or pushing something that's not good?
Yeah. And is this person sort of supporting me and building up my personality and like embracing what I'm about, or are they trying to like muffle it and make it like less great,
Hmm.
so they don't get overshadowed themselves?
Yeah. And also we also put that into effort the thought too, like because we said brought up the solo and the joint and stuff, you know,
Mhm.
there are times, and the reason I'm gonna like put this little side note in, I don't think that like you really need to also check yourself in this situation because there are times that maybe you put more effort in or the other person puts more effort in. That's different than feeling like you're just consistently going against each other, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, it's
So,
very typical in relationships. Like I've been in obviously a relationship 15 years, so like there is cycles, where one
mhm.
person's making more effort than the other, and it could be one person's busy with work or one person's going through some health stuff or whatever. But yeah, like it is normal for those types of cycles, and you can look at them as a cycle. There's your you're close and physical a lot and then later you're not and then one person's on a health kick and one's not and But yeah, like you do want to like build each other up, but you're sometimes will be on like a different wavelength, right? But it doesn't
But I
mean that,
bet you never felt lonely, like alone.
no.
Did you? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I never did. I know Terrence had times where, like, I'm so busy with work and stuff, she's like, it does feel, like, a bit lonely, but,
I
but
didn't mean
we
like physically. I meant like you didn't feel like it's you against her. Like I'm alone
no.
in this effort. That's what I mean. Not like physically. Like I
Y
mean, obviously, if you're working and she's at home, yes, she's gonna
right.
physically be alone.
Yeah, but I
But
mean, it got, like, it gets, like, when you're home, you're still not even really home 'cause you're so mentally preoccupied, but yeah, like, there is a no it's the same the whole theme of it is, like, is this a fixable issue or a non-fixable issue? It's the same with the relationship cycle stuff, like, some of it's normal cycles and it's unavoidable, and then other stuff is more of a big deal, and I think it's just important to be able to recognize if you're it's an issue that you can work through, or if it's an issue like the person just genuinely like doesn't jive with your personality and they feel threatened by you and or whatever it is. Like you can't just sort of build each other up together. Like it is always like a pendulum of one person getting pushed down to raise the other up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And another way I think also to kind of define that too is like, are you pushing it because you're avoiding being alone, or are you pushing it because you wanting to be with this specific person?
Yes. Yeah.
That's like a really big thing too. Like, is it that individual or is it the lack of an individual?
Yes.
So,
And a lot of people, they aren't like a full person going into a relationship, and that's never gonna solve your problems, right? You have to be pretty well rounded, and then the person we've talked about this before with like yourself, like you're like you've got all your things figured out more or less. So you're like, if I was to start dating a guy, I would want him to pretty much have his shit together and we could sort of build each other up. Like you don't want to grab some guy who's, couch surfing and doing whatever and unmotivated, like, so yeah, like you kind of have to recognize like some compatibility there before there's always going to be stuff to work on, I guess is what I'm saying, but like there has to be a certain amount of natural compatibility to get to as a baseline.
exactly, exactly. I think one thing too is like kind of like wrapping all of this up is to kind of think about like I think also people, and I've seen this a lot. I have one girlfriend, I adore her, I love her to death, but she's always continuing a relationship even though she's mentally checked out. All of those things we talked about have happened, like the
Hmm.
kind of stifling and sacrificing and losing yourself and whatever, whatever, and she's just fucking done.
Yeah.
And then they both just start treating each other like shit. The relationship is done, but she doesn't want to be single, so they keep staying together. And I've always kind of told her this, and I've seen it happen time and time again with her in relationships, where it's like, if you and I don't know if you can understand this, the guy listeners can understand this, but if you put a wax strip on your hair, you know, once it's on, that damage is done. You can't just leave it. You've got to pull it off. And
Mm-hmm.
how you pull it off is up to you. Like you can do it one by one and it's going to
Hmm.
be so fucking painful doing it like each hair at a time, or
Yeah.
you can just rip it off. And
Hmm.
that if you kind of take that metaphor and ripping it off, yes, it's one shock painful fucking situation.
Hmm.
But doing it by one is prolonging it and making it really much more painful piece by piece. And I think
Yeah.
that that's the same with these relationships. It's like it's not working, you're constantly forcing it, and you're actually causing more damage, making it more painful during a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And it's not working, you're just losing more and more and more of yourself. It's more self harm. Had you just walked away, yes, it would be sharp and painful, but you would start the healing process,
Yeah. And you would
And
likely end the relationship in a better way than riding it till the wheels fall off.
yeah, yeah, that's so true. That's so
Well, I
true.
said to my wife about a friend of hers, I was like, you can't be in a relationship waiting for a better relationship. That's like being on a bus riding around town thinking, I got to catch a different bus. Like you're never fucking catching that bus, being on the other bus, right? You got to get off the fucking thing away to the bench, right? Watch the crackheads and all.
That's so that's so interesting. I never thought of it
But
that way. That
it's
is
it,
so true.
someone somewhere the other day I saw something about women tend to hang on to the relationship and then jump into the next one where men tend to be single, and I know there's exceptions to everything, but I don't
I
I've
feel it's the other way around because you always see like the guy and the girl, like the guy divorces the woman and finds someone right away, like in the
yeah,
stories that I read. But
yeah,
you
yeah.
tell me, but I mean, obviously you base it on facts. I base it
Yeah,
on
well, I
gossip.
just I know a few people like of a few people I should say that you know hung on to the relationship way too long and were clearly like looking for someone else, but didn't, so it's like to make that next relationship work, I don't think it will ever work because you're so committed to trying to force your way through it now because you've left your spouse and you've gone straight into this relationship with somebody else, that you never had time to like, get off that bus and get recalibrated and like get in the good space and get to know yourself, what you need and all that. And then like we keep saying is like when you meet someone you want to date, you are compatible, you sort of build each other up, but these people, it's a limited pool when you're trying to find someone when you're currently with someone, so
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
you end up finding someone, instead of Mr. Right is Mr. Right now or whatever they say, right? you know
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I love your
yeah,
bus theory. I have a bus theory too. It was one from my 20s, so I
I
don't know if
didn't
I should
think
share.
it though, you having never been on a bus, I didn't think that would sink, but I'm sure you're familiar with them.
I've been on a bus actually. I have. I took a bus one time when my car broke down and I was in university at the time and I never went to class. Like the one fucking time I decided to go to class, my car breaks down. It's when I had the blue Mustang that you loved so much.
Ugh.
And um I get on the bus and you know this person, I won't say their name. I stopped being friends with someone in high school that went to your high school.
Mm.
Um and I was talking shit about them the entire bus ride with somebody else on the phone. And I turn around and their friend who I like barely like I'd never seen actually this girl, I don't think, was holding the phone. And the other girl was on the line. I mean, I wasn't friends with this girl for years anyway, so I didn't care that she had heard
Mhm.
heard me talk about all the shit I had said. And so I was then that person's mom called my mom, was like, "Can you please ask Sherry to stop talking shit about us?" I was really petty back
So
then.
that
Like
was it for buses, eh, after that. It
yeah,
was
and I told my mom, like, "This is my first and last fucking bus
this is like
ride."
you, like, I knew a guy that bought a used car once, and then 10 years later, bam, herpes, right? It's got nothing to do with the fucking bus, right,
No, but I was. It's like I talk shit about this person all the time in the privacy of my own car. Nothing happens. But
Yeah, and
on
then
that
then
bus,
you're on the 52 window coupe, and all of a sudden everybody's listening in, right? Yeah.
I was too young to think that maybe I just shouldn't be talking shit about people. So
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
the bus's
That's always
fault,
the last
right?
realization,
Yeah, yeah. It took me about another 10 years after that situation to realize you probably shouldn't talk so much shit about people. I'm good now. I don't do that. But I was very petty back then. I was very, very childish. And yeah, it was definitely the bus's fault. But yes, I've
Absolutely.
been on a bus.
It's not worth the risk.
It's
But
not what there is.
but yeah, it's ultimately, yeah, it's about, like so much of this is like you say, like the pushing versus the natural work that's needed in any relationship. It's like it's obviously a fine line, but you've got to, the key it would be to be able to identify if you're trying to force your way through an issue versus working through a typical normal issue that people would work through. Or are you like literally trying to put the tent back in the fucking bag it came in, which is not possible. This fucking
Exactly.
bag.
Exactly. I think the best way through these to navigate yourself through these is to constantly self check.
Yeah,
And
and,
just going
and
back
take
to,
constructive feedback from people. Like people are always hesitant to say, "Oh, I knew the guy was a prick, or I knew the girl was a jerk, but I didn't want to say anything." So if you have someone that's willing to say to you, "Hey, this is what I think," take it for what it's worth, but this, you're not the same person that I know when you're around this person. Like, try and don't overreact and blow up and get mad. Like, try and stew over it and think about it for a bit. Be like, is there some truth to that? Like, am I not my authentic self around whoever it is?
yeah, yeah. And again, always someone you trust and value their opinion, of course, too, right?
Yeah, and if
So,
they ride a bus, stay away from them for sure. Those are fucking scumbags. Or
um,
the SkyTrain, you can fuck that thing off too.
oh, I don't really scratch you either, too, because I once jumped on that without paying and I ended up with a ticket. So
That will happen.
I
Don't
haven't
you know
aged
who
a
I
bit.
am?
It
At least
was
for the
with
person
the
that didn't
actually
think she
with
had to
the
stop at stop signs either.
well, yeah, there was that too. But the person I talk shit about, I did the SkyTrain thing with. So I guess with her, when it comes to her, she might be the bad luck with me in public transportation.
Yeah,
So
you probably should stick with private jets at this point.
I'm trying. I'm really trying.
There you
But
go.
oh yeah. So I guess we'll wrap it up. All we're saying is, really self check if you're feeling neglected, feeling not loved, siloed, feeling stifled. Are you
Mhm.
sacrificing or are you growing? And these are the very, very most important things to self check to decide if you should stay and work on it, or if you should flee and rip that fucking wax right off.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can't be yourself? And if anyone approaches you with some constructive feedback, consider the source, but also consider maybe there's some legitimacy to what they're saying.
And really, really keep in mind that the pain it feels to leave that situation is going to be less painful than if you continue to stay in and constantly lose your self-worth and have to end up, those people always end up breaking up anyways. It's not like it will last forever, or they end
Mhm.
up so depressed and miserable. It's really honestly the worst situation of their life. So staying in a situation where it doesn't feel healthy and right for you is way, way, way worse than the pain that comes from breaking it off.
Yeah. And remember, women are like a vine. If you get dropped by one, you just swing with another.
I was gonna tell you my bus joke. Mine was men are like buses. Another one comes every 15 minutes. So that
I
was that was
thought it was
my
the men
bus
are like
joke.
parking spaces one. Yeah. I'll tell you that
Why?
one
What's the
later.
parking space?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'll tell
okay.
you off. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I
So there's
used to
two old
have
men
that
sitting in a
buses.
dirty deck chair. No, never mind. All right. Anyway, let's wrap it up. So, what do you
Yes.
figure? Over and out.
Follow us. Yeah, over and over. But follow us on the perfect underscore X on Instagram and on TikTok. We've been having a lot of TikTok movement. I've been trying my best to post however which way it is posting, but we're getting like 1,000 views.
You might be too
Um,
old to be on the TikTok.
I thought 1,000 views a lot. I think it's nothing really. I told my niece and she laughed, so I thought it was a lot.
I am on
But
the Facebook.
yeah, yeah, really. The Facebook is for us.
Yeah, we're like
The
Facebook,
TikTok is.
Instagram people. I think when you get to 30 and under or whatever, it's TikTok or whatever the next thing is, MySpace or whatever's coming back around.
Yeah, yeah. I
ICQ.
wouldn't mind for my. Yeah, I wouldn't mind for that stuff. I miss those days.
Oh boy.
But yeah, follow us, the perfect underscore X on Instagram, the perfect X on TikTok, and please subscribe, save, and share with your friends on
Yes.
the podcast.
For every subscriber, we will build a church in your honor. We
Okay.
definitely won't.
Oh, I won't be building anything. My hands
No.
are too
Yeah.
precious.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, you bet. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.